Hello, everyone, and hello, Nate. I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Zuckerberg.
I tell you what, the Facebook gremlins are out today. Holy mackerel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So we're on YouTube only today. Sorry, folks, who are trying to get us on Facebook. It will not even let me. It will not even let me go live. Oh, there. I can see us. I can see us in the back channel of it, but I can't. Still cannot click go live now. Cannot get on Facebook. So we're just gonna go with what we have on YouTube today. That's where we get most of our folks anyway. So we'll just roll with it. Hey, everybody. Hope you're doing
yeah.
well. Excited to be here again. Better on one streaming service than none, no streaming services. We're just having complaints of no sound on YouTube. I don't think that is that may be one person, not a bunch of people, because I'm only hearing it for one person. Anyway, we're gonna jump right into it. Hi, folks. Andrew Kambauer, Joshua Sims, Joseph Grasser, Sarah Coffey, so many other people. Dennis Parslow, John Anderson from Washington, Cynthia Breidenbach from Colorado. Lots of people on the internet's excited
This
to talk birds with us.
portfolio films says we're too political for Facebook.
Yeah,
Not
we
really.
absolutely are. I don't know what the deal is. Facebook is always a burr in our saddle, a
It
bee in our
is.
bonnet, and here we are without bee eaters or summer tanagers for that matter. Um, Here we
Yeah.
go. We are ready to talk birds. How's things over, Greg? We've had some weather down here in North Carolina. Thankfully,
Boy,
I was
you
on the
have.
outside of it. I was on the outside of it, thank goodness. Um, but folks out to the west are having a hard time of it for sure. A lot of all the people that I have seen and I've been in contact with are telling me that the effort is ongoing and very large to get the bulldozers in and the food in and all that stuff to get things cleaned out. So hopefully for the best. It's a beautiful part of the country, southern Appalachia in western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee. A lot of great birds there, and
Yeah.
hopefully the birds will be back for sure, and hopefully there'll be plenty of people there to watch them in the not too distant future. Greg, how are things up in Chicago?
Good. Good. Strange for September and October as far as
Yeah,
weather's concerned and
we're
birds.
swinging back and forth.
Um, we've had some we've had some good migration days, but it's been strange in the sense that and possibly due to all the strange weather to the east of us
Mm.
and south of us, but we've had sustained east winds for like a month and very little of the north and west winds that we expect, and it just keeps going back between east and south. So, September, mid to late September, early October is hawk season, and we have had zero hawk watch days. There's been practically nothing. And Sunday, this day after tomorrow, it's the first real push of west northwest winds, and I'll bet the floodgates open. And Sunday in the Great Lakes looks to be a really good day for hawks and other big migrants. You probably see some sandhill cranes, pelicans, who knows what.
The
Um,
big late birds, as
the
it
big
were.
lake birds, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much how it's been. We've had some pretty interesting vagrants here and there, which has been fun. We've had one or two Kirtland's warblers, and I think that's possibly has something to do with the east winds. Um,
Hmm.
you know, um,
And the fact that there are just more Kirtland's warblers around than there used to be.
Kirtland's warblers. It's not a story that you hear a lot about, but quietly, the breeding populations in Michigan and Wisconsin and in sort of adjacent Ontario are all increasing.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are more Kirtland's warblers around for certain.
Yeah, that's great. As far as the birds are concerned here, I haven't done a ton. Although I will say, we talked about a couple weeks ago the difference between pileated woodpecker and northern flicker. I don't know if we had that sort of a side conversation. Some folks were asking to if we for some tips on telling the difference when the birds are calling. And as an aside, this is I work as a high school soccer referee. in addition to being a bird person. And this is a very busy time of year for us because the season is ongoing. And I was standing next to a soccer field running the lines on some random high school in the middle of the boonies in Guilford County, and I heard the forest behind me, and I had a flicker call, and then like not more than about 45 seconds later, I had a pileated woodpecker call. And I thought to myself, wow, they really are pretty different when you hear them side by side. It's just you don't always get to hear them side by side, which is the frustrating thing with those. But the flicker was so much quicker and lighter, and the pileated looks like it is really kind of galloping along.
Yeah.
So as it's calling, and then I had to turn back to the game at hand. But there's always birds going by.
That was one of the great things of doing all the years of big days that I ran along the Mississippi River and the Illinois rivers, where that's probably the best place in the state to get pileated woodpecker.
Yeah,
but in the middle of May, there's also a ton of flickers around.
They're much louder. I hear flickers much more often. Yeah.
You're constantly hearing flickers all day long, and then when you finally hear a pileated, you're like, oh,
it's like, oh, that's
different. Yeah.
It's sort of like the downy hairy woodpecker thing when we get those pictures
Precisely.
on this bird, and people are always like, is it a hairy? Is it a hairy? And then someone posts a hairy, and it's like, oh yeah.
When you hear a hairy.
when you see a hairy, when you hear a hairy. We've been vamping, and I haven't really even talked about what we're doing here. Greg and I are the hosts of What's This Bird Live from the American Birding Association. The ABA is a membership organization for bird watchers. We host a couple groups on Facebook that help people learn about birds. One of them is What's This Bird? It's a friendly community where people take photos, descriptions, audio recordings of birds that they have encountered in their day-to-day lives, post them up on the group, and our community will help identify those. Every once in a while, we get a few interesting birds that we'd like to talk through a little bit more detailed, in a more detailed manner. And that's what this program is. Every 2 weeks, Greg and I come on here and we talk birds and birding with y'all. Hopefully, ideally on Facebook and Twitter. It's not Twitter anymore. Ideally on Facebook and YouTube, but now just on YouTube today because Facebook is being.
The Facebook gremlins have us all flustered, but that's all right. We'll get over it momentarily. Yes, and we both watch the comments here. So, and one of us watches Facebook and the other watches YouTube. But today we're both watching YouTube because Facebook is dead in the water.
Facebook is dead to us.
The point of that is we're watching the comments. That's gonna be your little card on the board behind you next week.
Yeah. Zuckerberg, Facebook maybe.
So AOS holds firm. Gonna be Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg better run.
Like Zuckerberg.
But in any case, you guys were watching the comments. So if you have anything to say, you got any questions, want to give a shout out, whatever, we're watching the comments, and we will do what we can to get to whatever it is you want to talk about. But as Nate said, we've got birds to get to and talk about. Even though we're a little bit late here, we'll try to keep this on.
I'm going to create a whole new one. I'm just going to go live.
Try to keep on Facebook? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't know. You keep dropping out on my audio.
Oh, I said on. You're going to just try to go live on Facebook?
Yep. I'm not going to do the event that I did. I'm just going to go live.
Well, I'm going to
do it live.
See what happens. We'll see. Who knows?
Anyway, if I look a little distant, that's what I'm doing.
We are watching as best we can, and nope. To the birds, I want to tell you about our upcoming ABA Community Weekend in Sacramento, California, which is at the end of this month. The community weekends are a gathering hosted by the ABA. So we come to your town, we put together bird walks, seminars, photo workshops. This one we're going to have, that was last year, I believe.
She did 3 paintings.
That's right. In their 3 prime habitats. And there's also going to be optics vendors there. And so there's a lot of stuff going on. If you go to aba.org and click the big graphic that you see on the screen right now, that'll get you into the webpage for that. And everything is free, but we ask that you sign up so that we can make sure we have plenty of space for everyone.
Please.
So yeah, pardon me. If you're going to be in Sacramento the weekend of October 26th and 27th and feel like birding with us, come on out because we would love to have you.
Sacramento.
So let's
Fresh and full of life.
All right, let's it's all we're well in here. Let's get into the birds, okay?
We have one question on YouTube that might be worth just talking about. It's a warbler related question, which is good for today.
Because today is all about warblers and, well, for the beginning part, warblers, and then something else.
Warblers. Sarah Harper asks, she has a yellow-rumped warbler at my feet are chasing other birds away from the food source. Is this common behavior for this bird? Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, if they're real hungry.
Sounds reasonable to me.
Pretty much all birds can be jerks at food sources.
That is absolutely true.
I've even seen mourning doves go metal, and that's yeah, birds. I mean, let's not forget, folks, birds are little dinosaurs. Given the opportunity, they will act like dinosaurs. I mean, even hummingbirds, like I've said many times, if hummingbirds were the size of German shepherds, everything would be dead.
Indeed. All right. I'm writing off Facebook. It's no.
Okay, I can tell you're like digging into the controls on Facebook.
I'm not doing it. I'm not dealing
Sorry,
with it.
Facebook.
All right.
All right. So we gave it away at the beginning
by talking about warblers, but
we're
why
gonna
is this
be
a
talking,
warbler, Greg?
That's okay. Because you know what? We're going to talk about warblers because it is getting to be the end of the big warbler fall push. So yeah, we got a warbler here
all the time.
Yeah. Except for yellow
rumps. This is a species of warbler that will stick around late into the year sometimes. And down where I live in the southeast, we get a handful of overwintering warblers, and this is one of the more common ones. Things to look for when you're first spot a warbler, if you get a decent eye level look at it, as this bird is presence of wing bars, and for this bird it is a yes. And what's the eye ring look like? And either
or does it even have an eye
ring? Or none, full, or partial. And this is a partial eye ring. You can see eye arcs on this bird. The white on the top, the white semicircles on the above and below the wing. I'm sorry, not the wing, but the eye, and then the black eye line that runs from the base of the bill through the eye to behind the eye. So we've got wing bars, we've got eye arcs. That'll narrow things down a bit. Other things to look at this bird. It's generally kind of a grayish on the head, gray, maybe a little bit of blue there. There aren't too many like plain blue or plain gray warblers. Usually our gray warblers do have a little bit of blue in there. And some yellow.
It's also half in the shadows.
Yeah, that's true. Not much you can get on the back, but it looks like the head, at least the hood, is kind of a bluish, kind of a slate gray. A lot of yellow on the chest, but that yellow is pretty much limited to the front of the breast, and it doesn't go all the way down the sides. White undertail coverts, relatively short tail. The bill looks pretty interesting here. I'm liking what I see in the bill here. That's pretty distinctive, but that's what we got. We got eye arcs, we got wing bars, we got yellow breast.
Yeah, and in the fall, the colors of certain parts, like the breast, the back, in the fall, unless it's at noon, the light can be low. It can be warmer than your brain might make it out to be, and light filtering through the yellow leaves can cast all kinds of colors onto the bird and change it up. But as Nate said, what we do see here,
to accommodate for all that,
what we do see here is a pretty compact bird with wing bars and eye arcs. So let's look at what choices we have with wing bars and eye arcs. And you'll see that the bird that we're talking about on the upper left really matches one of these pretty quickly. But, starting at the top right, cerulean warbler, it's kind of more,
It's compact. The shape
It's
is right, more or
compact. It's
less.
got a short tail. It's yeah. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's got the right shape. It's got the wing bars. Um, it's it's more of a greenish bird.
Mm-hmm.
And but you know,
Especially the females.
cerulean can be bluer and grayer. I mean, it's one of those color shifting birds in the fall, but it generally tends to have this kind of unique, almost blue yellow blend, gray
Mm-hmm.
yellow blend. It's also got a pretty sturdy bill
It
and
does.
tends to show a pretty distinct eye line and supercilium, that's eyebrow.
Mm-hmm.
And
Eyebrow.
often so much so that the one that it's mostly confused with is Blackburnian.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other color shifting and shape shifting warbler at the
It's our
bottom
ultimate
left
shapeshifter or
is
ultimate color shifting
pine.
bird. The most
And
variable warbler on the, I would say,
I
on the
would,
continent.
you know, we've talked several times about confusing fall warblers and how um, Roger Torrey Peterson,
All pine warblers.
yeah, Roger Torrey Peterson kind of did a little disservice to birders by saying that they're confusing because once you get to know them, they're really not so confusing.
In his
With
defense, he was looking at them through Coke bottles. So
That's true. That's true.
binocular technology had not reached
As
even
this is
the
true.
lower limits of modern binocular technology.
But pine warbler is truly confusing because it can look like almost anything, and
Yeah.
behaviorally, it can behave like almost anything and be almost
Yeah.
anywhere. So
Yeah.
pine warbler is one of those birds, but we look at the picture in the upper left and we see a couple of things, and I think Christy Esmahan pointed out yellow feet, and yes, that is true. Parulas have yellow soles on their feet that creeps up the sides of the toes and the back. And if you can see it, it gives a pretty distinct impression.
Mm-hmm.
Also notice that the bird in the upper left, our bird in question, has a bicolored bill. It's
I was
black on
just gonna
top
point
and
that out. That was
yellow
gonna be the
underneath.
last thing I was going to point out because that is the parula, whatever.
Yep.
That is the smoking gun, as it were, for northern parulas. There are only two species of warbler in the ABA area that have bicolored bills, and one of them is northern parula, and the other one is tropical parula. So you only
Yeah.
got two to choose from, and most of the continent's going to be northern parula. Another thing to say about pine warbler, just in passing, is that structurally it's quite different from the parulas,
It
which
is.
are kind of small, compact, flitty, kinglety almost kind of warblers. Pine warbler is a big warbler. It's a lanky warbler. It's a heavy set warbler. Tends to have a long body and a long tail, and especially a big, heavy bill. It's almost
Yes.
more like a vireo than a warbler. In fact, people do frequently confuse a yellow-throated vireo in particular, and sometimes blue-headed vireos, really pale-colored blue-headed vireos, sometimes for pine warbler as well. And pine warbler, I mean, I just cannot emphasize enough how variable they can be, especially this time of year. They really run the gamut from these super pale first-year females that can be like gray all over for the most part to these almost breeding plumage type males, the adult older males that are just sort of so rich even in fall and like every single step in between. Frequently, you see pine warblers in groups with other pine warblers. They like to kind of hang out together this time of year in kind of small, loose flocks. A lot of times they'll be pretty low to the ground, hanging out on the ground, walking around on the grass
Yep.
sometimes, even or as high up in trees. Like they can be anywhere, they can be everywhere, and they can look like anything. They can be tough
Absolutely.
warblers. It's a good place to start when you're trying to identify a mystery warbler. But you can also notice
Absolutely.
the eye arcs aren't as big on the pine warbler, and the breast, the yellow, is sort of more diffused throughout the underpart of that bird, as opposed to the parla, where it's very kind of limited right to that breast color and doesn't go
Yep.
too much beyond the bottom part of the breast.
Yep. And Wayne Klockner points out that the olive back contrasts with the
Yeah,
gray
when you can
wings
see
and
it.
head,
Yep.
which, if you can see it, is a great field mark and it's unique. But in the bird, the photo in question, we really can't see that, and so we have to rely on other things. And as Nate said, if you can see the bicolored bill, that's slam dunk. And often from below, the bill, it looks kind of broad at the base and yellow, and it really stands out as being different when you see a bird, when you see a northern parula overhead. We have a couple questions from Aaron, and who asks, birds' feet have soles? Absolutely.
Sort of.
And what is the texture
Not
of
in
a
the sense,
bird's
not in the
soles?
sense of that humans have souls, but
Well, we're talking about the physical
it's their fingers.
bottoms
it's their
of the
fingers, essentially.
feet.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Not the larger exist. Anyway.
Who knows? Do birds
but-
have souls? I've never been able to
But
ask
they,
one.
I mean, it's generally padded, kind of like the palm of your hand. If you had
Yeah.
really, really
Got a little,
calloused,
like, grip.
if you had
Yeah.
really calloused hands, it would be somewhat similar to the soles of a bird's feet. And
And some birds, especially those that feed on, like raptors that feed on slippery things, like ospreys, sort of famously
I was
have
just going there.
very kind of calloused and bumpy and rigid and rough soles for grabbing fish. So that's abnormal.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, our bird in question here is a northern parula, and I guess we're just going to go to the next bird. Another warbler from New Jersey,
Another warbler.
and
So-
this one
Yeah,
one
we're
does not
talking
have
about-
wing bars,
I was
but
just
it
going to
does
say
have
we're
eye
talking
arcs.
about things to look for when you first see a warbler. Presence of wing bars, presence of eye markings, arcs versus eye rings versus nothing are where to start. This bird is got eye arcs.
Yep.
It's got some actually kind of an interesting pattern there on the face.
Yeah.
But it does not have wing bars. Though the wings do not seem entirely plain. There's a little bit of a marking there at the base of the primaries, it looks like. But
Yeah.
for the most part, there's not a lot going on this bird's wings. Pretty plain.
That
Big old
upper
bill,
eye
though.
arc is
That big
is
bill with the curved
really
bill.
big and long.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Sarah Coffey says looks like an eyebrow rather than
Indeed.
an eye arc, and
Indeed.
indeed it does. Indeed it does. So let's take a look at the warblers that do not have wing bars, but do have eye arcs. And looking at the face patterns, ooh, boy, there's a couple there that come pretty close, but one kind of stands out.
Yeah, I like
for a-
orange-crowned warbler there. It's got those nice little partial eye arcs, kind of with the classic field marks for orange-crowned
Mhm.
warbler. But some things that do not work for orange-crowned warbler: very small bill on an orange-crowned
Right.
warbler, almost like a little tiny needle. Very different than the kind of large curved bill in our mystery bird. And the face pattern is not the same. The eye arcs are not as big. They're not as well defined. And it certainly doesn't have an eyebrow.
Yeah,
Tennessee
and the
warbler has an
gray-
eyebrow, but not much of an arc on the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, the gray on the face, the orange crown
Yeah.
warbler is one of those very variable birds. It can be quite green, but it usually tends to show a grayish head. Whereas this bird, the gray is limited to the ear patch or auricular. And that face pattern kind of matches palm warbler more than any other of the four, and black-throated blue. Tennessee warbler, it's got that strong eye line, and it's got usually shows a fairly strong supercilium. Really gives it a different feel. Some Tennessee warblers will show a lower arc on the eye, but it's never really bold like it is on this bird here.
Also, very
And,
small bill on a Tennessee warbler, similar. To
And
orange
again,
crowned
yes,
warbler in that
exactly. Like orange crown, Tennessee has a very small, sharp bill. This bird has kind of a big honking bill for a warbler.
Palm warbler is interesting. The face is more similar, but the thing about
Yep.
the palm warbler is that you notice that the under part of that palm warbler, they've got that big yellow rump and a yellow undertail. Basically, the whole back end of that bird is banded in yellow.
Yep.
And it's very different from the color on the side and on the belly. In our mystery bird here, it looks like the entire underside is more or less the same color from front to back. There's no difference in the saturation, even though it is a bit oversaturated here. I think
Yes.
a lot of that green yellow color is more of a reflection from the leaves, as it is pretty consistent all the way from the back of the underparts to the front of the underparts. If it were a palm warbler, I think we would be able to see that the undertail coverts would be more yellow than the belly and the flanks, and that's certainly not the case in our mystery
Ab-
bird wagon, which I guess leads us to.
well, absolutely. And another thing too is just the general color of the back. It's
Mm-hmm.
greenish. It's
Yeah,
not brownish. And the wing panel is a different color and tone, different feel than
yeah,
the
you can see
back.
that
And
edging on the tertials on the palm
on the
warbler
palm
as
warbler,
well. It's got that pale edges on those essentially the shoulder feathers that kind of cover the inner flight feathers when the bird's wing is folded. You can
exactly.
see those very well there, and this bird has all dark tertials for the most part. Our mystery bird.
Yeah, the Andrew Kembler asks about the leg color, and
Also a
really in
good
these
point.
birds, leg color is not much of a field mark.
Hmm.
And on some birds, on some warblers, it definitely is, whether they have dark legs or bright pink legs.
Yeah.
Sort of like a common yellow throat is one of those warblers that
Hmm.
looks like a few different things, but has big bright pink legs. So that rules out things like pine warbler, for instance, which can look like anything, as we've said. But yeah, our bird is a black-throated blue warbler, and there's three things that stand out on a female or fall young, first year black-throated blue warbler. And one is, as was pointed out earlier, I think Sarah, or I forget, I've lost in the comments where it is, but black-throated blue warbler has a unique combination of lower eye arc and upper eyebrow,
Hmm.
and it's our only warbler that has that, and that is framed by this gray auricular that stands out from
Little
the rest of
mask.
the bird's
Yeah.
face, almost exactly, almost like a mask, and it's unique. Second thing, as Nate pointed out, is the tiny little, almost not there, white spot at the base of the
Hmm.
primary, right at the bend of the wing. You'll notice how the black-throated blue in the comp has the bold, what they call a handkerchief.
Hmm.
Um, but our bird is missing that, and first-year birds often do.
Yep.
So if it's there, great. If it's not, don't discount it just because you don't see it.
Right.
But then the last thing, which we can clearly see in the picture, but you have to know to look for it to be noticeable, is that the base of the tail is the slate blue gray.
Yeah, you can see that.
You can see it, but if you don't,
This is a young
if
male.
if you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it. And if you see that sort of that bluish slatish gray, either on the head or sometimes it'll be on the crown a little bit or at the base of the tail, you've got yourself a black-throated blue warbler.
Like a black-throated blue warbler. Looks just like the flag of Estonia. It does.
I think you have like this big bucket next to you where you just pull this stuff out of
corner.
you just reach
corner.
in there and it's like reaching into the
Seriously, go look at the flag of Estonia. It reminds me of
I don't even have to look. I'm sure it looks exactly like a
exactly like a black-throated blue warbler.
we will start a campaign to change the flag of Estonia to an actual black-throated blue
actual
warbler.
black-throated blue. It's a shame that
Yeah.
there are no black-throated blue warblers in Estonia.
Because it would just work so well.
It would work. It would work.
We could start it. We
Instant
could start
national
an
bird.
introduction plan.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got so many. Anyway, yeah. So our bird here is I'm going to call it a first-year black-throated blue warbler.
I'd agree with that.
Probably a male, but the females
Yeah.
can show that blue on the tail as well. So yes, black-throated blue warbler. And Christy Bass says, missed y'all in the middle of the woods in East Tennessee. I hope you guys are all right there
Got
in
better
East
things
Tennessee.
to do than watch bird ID
Yeah.
videos.
But we're glad you're here, and we're glad you're
Yeah.
safe enough to be able to watch us.
See,
Yes,
Aaron Kleiman put it.
Aaron
in the
came. Aaron
comments.
came through. Aaron came through with the flag, so we could all see what it looks like. So I said we got warblers and something else. So let's go into something else, and we're gonna do some shorebirds.
We got a big old shorebird here. It definitely gives a large impression for this one. It's got a large body.
Texas
It's got
coast.
a big head. It's got a big, thick, straight bill, which marks this as a plover or plover, if you will, as opposed to a sandpiper, which tend to have much longer bills, even if they are roughly this size. So plover. So we can kind of break it down into two groups. You've got your ringed plovers in the genus Charadrius. I believe they've broken up Charadrius recently.
Yeah.
Killdeer may be the only one left, but in any case, I always think of them as Charadrius. Your plovers with bands on them, primarily black and white. And then you've got your pluvialis plovers, which are your kind of bigger, long distance migrant, kind of dove shaped plovers. This one's definitely in that. And in that group are your black-bellied plover and your golden plovers, at least in North America. Actually, all around the world. It's
I mean,
black-bellied plover, which
in
is
the
whole
old
Arctic,
world,
which
they're
is
called
found in the old world. Gray plover.
gray plover. They're called gray plover in the old world.
Lacks imagination, in my opinion. But golden plover is definitely on it. So American golden plover and black-bellied plover is a common identification conundrum. So we'll work our way through
It
this
is,
one. But some
and
things to think about. Just in passing, I'll make this quick, Greg, so you can get to it. Is wing length is a good thing to look for on these birds, and bill size and structure. Black-bellied plovers tend to have a larger, thicker bill than the golden plovers.
Yeah,
So think about that as we walk through this one.
Yeah, what I was going to point out here is that this bird is in transitional plumage between alternate and basic. That would be breeding and non-breeding, but we can see like a hint of the breeding pattern of that beautiful. I mean, both species are beautiful in breeding plumage with this rich black.
I don't like
breast
the
and
gray
face.
plover as a name.
The back is
short.
The back is very gray compared to golden. But yeah, it does kind of discount the beauty of that species. But all right, so let's take a closer look at those two, American golden plover and black-bellied plover. And so our bird is in the upper left. And, I think really if you look at the bill, one of those two stands out as being a pretty good match. And that's black-bellied plover. And I will say from experience, 90% of the time, the bill is the first thing you're going to notice. And once you get comfortable with them, they're so different that you're really not going to need anything else. But
yeah, I agree with you, Greg. The bill is definitely the first place you look. I mean, that black-bellied plover has that massive, fiddler crab crushing bill.
Exactly.
And American golden plover is just generally more dainty. And honestly, while it is not hard and fast, the habitat is always kind of a nice thing to think about with these birds, because I do tend to see black-bellied plovers on beaches, on sandy beaches like this, whereas American golden plover is, it's got that very long migration that goes from the tundra all the way down to the pampas of South America, and it is a grassland species. And even when it's close to the beach, you don't always see them on the beach. You're more inclined to see them on the other side of the dunes, kind of in the short grass. That's where I always associate golden plovers: sod farms, old fields, things like that. Whereas black-bellied plover, at least where I live, I mean, in the inland, well inland, you can get them both. But black-bellied plover is a beach bird, and golden plover is not.
Yes. Having said that, though, during migration, anything can show up on a concrete jetty like this one in Bolivar, Texas. So during migration, birds can show up anywhere and be doing almost anything. But looking, as Nate said, American golden plover tends to be a slimmer, more attenuated looking bird. And the reason for that is it has longer wings. It's a longer distance migrant. Yep. And in the two on the right, you can see how the black-bellied looks kind of big, thick, blocky, chunky, short-winged compared to the American golden plover above, which is slimmer, longer, smaller headed. The bill is more dainty. And if you look at, I realize they're in slightly different poses and everything else, but if you look at the bird in the upper left that we're talking about, you see all that stuff. The bird, it's got a big bill. It's got short wings that just reach, barely go beyond the end of the tail. Whereas, golden plover goes noticeably beyond the tail.
Very pointy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, our bird in question is a black-bellied plover. A couple of other things to point out. Black-bellied plover always has white undertail coverts. American golden plover does in completed alternate plumage, but in most other plumages, it's got some mottling or speckling or whatever, or it's just black on the undertail. But if the bird is moving around, if it's stretching its wings, or if you see them fly, then it's a slam dunk, because the black-bellied plover has these very distinct black wing pits, whereas the golden plover has just grayish wing pits, and it doesn't have a white rump. And the black-bellied plover has a white tail that's finely barred and a bright white rump. So really, when you put that all together, they're two really different looking birds when you put when you assess the gestalt.
Great point by Andrew Haffington, who notes that the on a golden plover, the bright white eyebrow stands out at a distance more than perhaps black-bellied rather than the bill. And that's a great point. They do look like very white-faced when they're a bunch of them standing out in a field somewhere, which is typically how I encounter them. And it just plays into the whole kind of smaller head, petite look of the bird, whereas black-bellied plover is just so chunky.
And when you get down into the details, the pattern on the wing coverts and the back and the tertials, actually the whole wing panel is subtly different. The pattern is noticeably different, but as these birds molt and the feathers, right now, really these birds can look almost like anything. And as I said, when you get comfortable with the bill size and shape, like you said, Nate, that big fiddler crab cracking bill on the black-bellied really does stand out. And one last thing, American golden plover, if it lands on a concrete jetty or a break wall, a rocky break wall, it's usually there only for a second or two, and then goes off in search of some better habitat. Whereas black-bellied plover is right at home out there on the rocks or on the jetty.
Yeah, I see them on the beach a lot this time of year.
Another
quick thing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but timing is a really good clue for these birds as well. I think most American golden plovers, I'd hesitate to say almost all American golden plovers, are south of the U.S. border by now, though there might be a few hanging around. I always think
stragglers,
of
but
September bird. Yeah, early September.
Whereas black-bellied plovers, I've seen them in Chicago into November.
Oh yeah, they're all throughout the winter where I am in the southeast.
Right,
so.
right, yeah. Question here from Lisa says the top of the black-bellied plover's legs seem to have a distinct amount of white feathers, much more than the American golden plover. Is that a fluke? Yeah, it is.
I think so,
it just happens to be that way on this particular bird. But yeah, that's not a field mark that I would look for or try to use. But yeah, as Sarah is saying, the flight pattern, and shorebirds very often when they're doing their thing will lean forward and stretch their wings up and give you a good look at the underwing pattern. And when they do that, boom,
Pluvialis
you got
plovers
it.
do that a lot.
Yeah. All right, we ready for our next shorebird?
Let's do it.
You sure?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay. We're going to go out to Morro Bay, California. Home of, is that
Definitely
where Alvaro lives?
a shorebird. It's near enough.
It's near enough where
Lives in
Alvaro
Half
lives. Our
Moon
buddy
Bay.
Alvaro Jaramillo,
Shows up
and
occasionally.
our buddy Amar Ayash are both out there right now.
Oh, is that right?
I think you've got Amar coming up on a podcast soon, don't you?
Yeah, I just got a copy of his new Goal Guide. I've got it over there on my bookshelf. Fabulous, fabulous book. Yeah, we got a shorebird here. Looks like a decent sized shorebird, though it's kind of hard to get a real sense of the size. The grasses around it make it seem like maybe it's a little bit smaller than the impression that I'm getting from this bird standing on its own. But the first thing that stands out to me is that big bill. It's got a big, long, curved bill. There's a handful of shorebirds to think about. Pretty plain on the top. Not a lot of color, not a lot of pattern.
Nope.
Hard to get a sense of the legs on this bird. I would say that they're dark, but with that, I'm not really seeing a lot here, so I don't know if I can be, entirely sure of that. But yeah, I mean that bill's big. There's like four or five shorebirds to think about when you've got a bill like this.
The bill's big, and the gray color is pretty concolorous from front to back, and seems to wrap around the upper breast a little bit, possibly a lot. It's hard to say because of the angle. Yeah, and it's a pretty dark kind of I don't know what kind of gray you'd call it. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Gunmetal gray.
Yeah, a little less blue than that, but I see where you're going. So let's
Joseph,
look at
Joseph Grasser asks Tringa. Good question. Always nice to break our shorebirds down into groups, but Tringas, which are our willet, yellowlegs, and there's a bunch of other weird ones, tend to have a little bit more pattern on these than this bird. This one is pretty plain all the way through, and while there are greater yellowlegs can have a large bill, it tends to curve upwards rather than downwards, and willet, especially the I can't remember which is the big billed one. I think it's the eastern willet that's the big billed one.
That's the big billed one.
Yeah, it is pretty straight, like a baton. Whereas this
one thing we can see well on this bird are the tertials, and they're as plain and gray as anything else.
Yeah,
and
not a lot on them. It's
most of the Tringas tend to show some
wrapping over the wing.
Distinct pattern on the tertials in particular, as well as the back.
Which flag is this gray? I don't know. There are any grays. There are no gray flags. It's definitely a color we need more of, or not. It's kind of a boring color.
Or not. So let's look at what this might be, because there are some options here.
Yeah, these are the four.
So looking at the bird on the upper left, which is our mystery bird, the bill shape is kind of unique in the sense that it's thick, it's long, it gives us impression of being decurved, but if you really look at it closely,
not sure it's really decurved. Yeah,
it's kind of straight with a droop at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said this, shorebirds the bills can be quite variable, and males and females tend to have bigger bills than males. Mm-hmm. And in some species that can be very, very distinct and confusing. But in these birds that we're looking at, it's generally what we're going to talk about here holds true. So this bird has that long bill with a distinct droop at the end. And so you look at the four that we have here, and I think we can see that shape in the dunlin at the top, and the stilt sandpiper has this. It's sort of the opposite shape of a greater yellowlegs. A greater yellowlegs has this almost barely perceptible upturn to the bill, whereas stilt sandpiper has this almost perceptible decurve, little downward bend that applies to the whole bill. If we look at curlew sandpiper to the left,
even more so.
It's even more so, and it's more distinct. Western sandpiper, that is the one, as I talked about the difference between males and females in the bill length and also age.
Yeah.
Western is the most confusing because the bill can be anywhere from long like this bird to short like a semi-palmated sandpiper, and
Yeah,
anywhere
and I
in
think part of
between.
that is because Western sandpiper is such a small bird just in general, so that relatively
Exactly.
small differences in the bill length are going to appear to be more consequential on the bird itself.
Exactly. Also, notice just how the two birds on the left. And the reason I included curlew sandpiper here, curlew sandpiper
They're around.
is
They're around right now.
is a
Two of
rare
them.
vagrant to North America, but Morro Bay is one of those places where if you're
Yeah,
gonna get a curlew sandpiper, that's
both
probably
both
a good.
ends, both ends of the continent.
Yeah. But look at how bright white the face and underparts are,
Hmm.
compared to the bird that we have
The
here,
face,
which
especially.
is just kind of dun colored. Dun dun
Hmm.
dun. Um, and also Western Sandpiper is a
Like
peep.
peat dun colored.
It's a little guy that tootles around like a little clockwork toy and doesn't
Hmm.
really act like a Dunlin or any of these other birds in particular. If you can see the legs, Stilt Sandpiper has yellow legs.
Yeah,
Also, Stilt and Curlew have white rumps. So if you get the wings raised, you get the bird to fly, you're going to see the white rump, and that rules out Dunlin immediately.
yeah,
And then you just need to look at the leg color.
yeah.
Now, of
Stilt has a very
course,
distinctive way of moving too.
it does.
They're kind of like halfway between a dowitcher and a yellow legs, like they're the exact midpoint between those two birds. They kind of walk around on a mud flat like a yellow legs, but they'll do like the little scissor motion like a dowitcher sometimes, not as emphatically as a dowitcher, and they'll frequently submerge their whole head when they do it and kind of tip up in a real funky and distinctive manner. But yeah, that's still sandpiper. They're funny little birds.
Uh, uh, Christy Esmahan says that the mystery bird seems to have a white rump. It doesn't. Those feathers are fluffed up,
Yeah,
and
I think that's fluffed
we're
up. That's the
looking as much
base of the
through them
feathers.
as
Yeah.
we are at them. Um, and Andrew Haffenden says Dunlin is brown, not gray. Well,
Yeah,
it's
compared to the other kind of similar wintry sandpipers for sure. It's more brown. It's
absolutely,
it's
but
like
light,
it's a richer color
and you can see that in the brownish cheek
a little
patch
bit.
on this
Yeah.
bird. But one of the field marks of a spring, an alternate stilt sandpiper, is they have chestnut colored cheeks,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
in the fall they can retain some of that and
Mhm.
look browner than they do in winter plumage like we see here. And I forget who, somebody mentioned the tertials. So the tertials and the wing panel and the scapulars all have some pale fringing on them. And most of, these new feathers have pale fringing on them and can make it look real scaly. And I threw the curlew sandpiper in there. That's a pretty worn bird, and the fringing is mostly worn off. Whereas on
Mhm.
the stilt sandpiper and the Dunlin, those feathers are really fresh and have bold fringing on those feathers.
Yeah.
Typically, they don't have that much fringing on them. It wears off pretty quickly. So one of the
Mhm.
field marks for curlew sandpiper is that it's got this sort of scalloped, scaly look on that part of the bird, whereas the other ones don't as much. But
You can certainly see that on those birds. And if we're trying to describe what the tertial is, if people are curious about what that means. So when the bird folds its wing, as you can see in these Dunlins, the Dunlin and the Spilt Sandpiper
yes,
especially, just the way they're standing, you can see it really well. You can see that finely patterned wing feather, and those are the feathers on the wings, the long primaries that kind of extend out beyond, and then you've got kind of the scapulars that are those scaly shaped ones that are kind of on the forearm that kind of are above the main flight feathers. And then when the bird folds its wings, the feathers that are kind of on its shoulder are big and kind of fluffy in a different pattern, and they kind of lay over and protect those flight feathers, and those are the tertials. And you can see the difference. I'm pointing as if you could see where I'm pointing. You
yeah,
can't see where I'm pointing. But you can see in the birds here, the heavily patterned heavily patterned feathers are the feathers on the wing. The kind of not heavily patterned ones, the plainer grayer ones that are kind of laid on top of those, and you can see where the pattern changes. Those are the tertials. Those are the kind of the shoulder feathers. They kind
Right.
of disappear into the back a little bit when the bird has its
And
wings out, and but when the wing is folded, you can see them lay on top of those. And frequently, especially in shorebirds, the tertials will a lot of times have some really nice pattern on them that you can use to help identify those birds.
yeah, pretty much in all of the Tim's got a good comment there.
That's probably right.
The tertials in a nutshell lay on top of the primaries when the wing is folded, and
Yes.
depending on the bird, and that goes for everything from warblers to shorebirds and hawks. Um, and the one field mark in a lot of birds is what we talk about frequently as primary projection, and
Mm-mm.
that is usually how far the primaries stick out from the tertials.
Yeah.
Primary
Yeah.
length is, as we were talking about with the golden and black-bellied plover, the primaries are longer than the tail.
Mhm.
The primaries are actually longer. But when you talk about projection, you're most often talking
Where the
about
tertials end and the
and the
primaries begin.
primaries stick out exactly.
Andrew
Um,
Haffington also brings up another good point. A lot of good points
yes.
coming from Andrew Haffington today. Thank you
Yep.
for that. Dunlin is hooded, unlike others, especially curlew. So it's a large least, so the least is a small Dunlin. Yeah. So like Dunlin is a large calidrid. It's a large. We
Right.
think of the peeps. White rump Baird's, semi-palm, western least. Those are very small sandpipers. Dunlin is a bigger, more substantial, deep-bellied, pot-bellied, big-bodied shorebird. Not as big as like a peck, but it's approaching peck size. And when you see those big birds with a very long bill and the hooded appearance, like it looks dark all over with very little pattern. That's what says Dunlin to me when I see them in the winter out on the beach. It's that big dark shorebird.
Yes.
That's quite different from all the white that we're seeing on a lot of these other comparison species.
And as you hinted to earlier, the feeding style is different too.
Yeah.
Dunlins tend to be pretty slow and methodical.
Yeah.
Stilt sandpipers are kind of. I mean, it works better when you're comparing them to yellowlegs because they have more of a
Mhm.
sewing machine, almost Dowitcher like
Yeah.
action compared to a yellowlegs, which tend to pick and run a little bit more.
Yeah. Or
Um,
chase.
and then curlew sandpiper. You're not going to see enough curlew sandpipers in
I was
North
just gonna say
America
I
to
have not
really
seen
worry about
enough
that.
curlews. I think I've seen curlew like once or twice in
I've
North
seen
America.
I've
So
seen two or three, and that's in 50
yeah,
years, and that's about
yeah,
it. And also notice the eye lines on the stilt and curlew.
yeah.
So really the pair that's most difficult to tell apart are curlew and stilt, unless you can see the legs. However, Dunlin is another one of those. When it's worn and you get one with a long bill, it can be really confusing at first. But this bird also, the bird on the upper left, our mystery bird, which isn't a mystery anymore, also has that typical kind of sad, kind of like mopey look that is, I think, emblematic of a Dunlin. They just kind of look mopey and dumpy. I don't know
Yeah.
how else to
Or
explain it.
Dunlins. Yeah.
Okay, I think we got another shorebird coming up here.
Yeah, we're going over because we started late. So you
Yeah,
get
we did.
extra bonus bird time, folks.
um. Oh wait, this thing is swimming. That's not a shorebird.
It's a duck. It's a grebe.
It's a grebe.
Black and white.
It's a black and white warbler.
Yeah, why not? I
Why
bet they could
not?
swim.
As I said, during migration, anything could be anywhere.
Anything can happen.
So
Yeah, a lot. Like we're breaking our shorebirds down into groups. When we come
yes,
across a shorebird that is primarily black and white in the winter months, it has kind of a long dark bill and is swimming. A lot of
swimming.
shorebirds can swim. People are surprised by it, but one that
Yes.
does it, almost all the time, whereas typically part of its regular foraging behavior are our phalaropes. We have three species of phalarope here in North America, and in fact around the world. Two of them are whole Arctic. One of them is North America only. They all tend to have kind of interesting patterns on the face, long needle thin bills, and a penchant for going out in deep water and spinning around in circles and making a little vortex and picking up all the cool invertebrates or whatever that get caught up in it and brought to the surface. They have slightly webbed feet. It's not uncommon among shorebirds, but I think
they have
they're
lobes
the ones that actually
on their
use it.
feet.
Yeah, lobes. That's right.
Like
they're lobed,
like
just
a
like grebes.
Just
Yeah.
like grebes, they do. And
Grebes.
but as Nate said, you'd be surprised some of the things that you might see swimming. I remember one time
I've seen willets swim.
I've
seen willets swim pretty frequently.
I've seen a flock of
Yeah.
avocets like
Oh,
100
avocets
yards,
will do it.
100
Definitely.
yards out in
Yeah.
the water, just
Yep.
swimming around. Yeah. But yeah, and Sarah Coffey says tiny. That is something that we always point out is that
They're
when the
small.
bird is like this, you really can't tell how big it is.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I mean, so you gotta
Unless you're an
gives the-
expert in fluid dynamics and you can determine the size
it
of the
gives the
waves.
impression of being tiny.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at a single photo with nothing really in the picture to compare it to, that can be very, very tough to ascertain. And I'm going to kind of get to that in the comp. So
I'm convinced, Greg, it's a Western grebe.
It's a Western grebe. Let's look at the Phalerapes. This bird immediately stands out as a red-necked phalarope because of the big white braces on its back.
That'll do it.
That is a slam dunk between all three species. If you see those two white, or in young birds they can be buffy braces running down the back, those big stripes, you're done. It's a red-necked.
Yep.
Having said that, in transitional plumage, that usually holds true. I've only seen it not hold true a couple of times. And Sarah, yes, compared to a mallard, they are tiny. And that was
Mallards
the
are
point
big.
I'm trying to make. But other things that are talked about with phalaropes, let's look at the Wilsons here on the
Right.
left. Look at how long-necked and graceful and long-billed and plain-faced that bird is. And
Gray phalarope.
yeah, please don't do that, because just like gray plover in Europe and the old world, red phalarope is called gray phalarope. And I'll tell you
You
what,
love
if
to
you
name
only-
their birds about the most boring aspects of the
if
bird.
you only see it in this
Come on
plumage,
now.
come on. If you only see it in this plumage, I would call it gray phalarope.
I
too.
don't. I can count on less than 2 fingers the number of times I've seen red phalarope in red plumage, but still
Yeah.
call it red phalarope.
Yes, no, I agree with
It's
that.
about ambition.
But so, the Wilsons can be tossed out here just by shape and just
Pattern.
how overall plain it is.
Yeah.
Now, one thing about red and red-necked is if you look in the field guides, they point out the difference in bills like it's a big difference, and it can be. But
be.
sometimes, as with these two birds on the right, it's not. And it can, like we're talking about with shorebirds, the bills can be quite variable between male and female and how old the bird is. So that red phalarope up there has a small bill for a red phalarope. It's thin.
That's a thin bill. Yeah, you got a thin-billed red phalarope. A lot of times it's
Exactly.
shorter and thicker.
And it's very often yellow
When
at
you
the
get a
base.
look like this, honestly, most of my phalaropes are like a small flock of birds out on the open ocean flying by at about Mach 5. So
Yes.
you're lucky if you see the bill.
Yes, and David Becker points out that an immature Savins gull swimming can look like a phalarope at a long distance, and
Yeah,
that's
great
why
point.
I threw,
Even like Bonaparte's gull too.
exactly, and that's why I threw the little gull in there, because the little gull is the littlest gull,
Right on the
and
chin.
the phalaropes are about 8 inches long. Little gull is 11 inches long, and when a bird's all by itself on the water, you can't tell the difference between 8 inches and 12 inches. There's a lot of jokes to be made here, and I want you all to just be quiet. So, but
We're a family show.
thank you. No, the first red phalarope I found when I was 13 or 14 years old on Montrose Beach in November. And it was paddling around in the where the rack line was sort of, just off the rack line. And I was certain I found a little gull. And it turned out to be a red phalarope. That's how small little gulls are. And you look at the pattern and everything, they really are quite similar.
Yeah, especially at a
But
distance.
obviously there's a difference in the bill and some other things. But yeah, in
Where was
winter
this photo taken,
phalaropes-
Greg?
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, inland. In my experience, you tend to get more redneck phalaropes. Almost,
Definitely.
like, yeah, especially this time of year, they'll show up in little retention ponds and stuff randomly. Red phalarope is almost exclusively, right on the ocean. It really is a true pelagic species, and redneck, migrates over the continent and will touch down just about anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, our bird in question is a red-necked phalarope in winter plumage, and yeah, there we go. We have our phalaropes. So it looks like we did it.
We did it. We got there.
And
The end.
I would like to remind. Let me see. I move my buttons around. There we go. Where is it? There it is.
Oh yeah,
Right up there. If you guys enjoy what we do, you enjoy this program, you enjoy the podcast, the ABA Birding Podcast, the American Birding Podcast, blah, 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 which I think is one of the best natural history podcasts out there with your host, Nate
we're
Swick.
not as good as Sasquatch.
Well, I don't know about that. But hit that join button on our website
Please
at
consider joining.
aba.org and help support us and help keep the lights on and keep these programs going. And also, don't forget that at the end of this month, we have a
Sacramento.
ABA community weekend in Sacramento. So all of you guys in California, or if you're visiting, be sure to hang out with us.
Northern California.
And exactly, and
It's a big state.
the state as big as many countries.
State as big as many countries.
Oh boy, I think it's time to go. Thanks again,
Yes.
everybody, and we will.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
We'll see you soon. Bye.